always. So when did you first become aware of her significance to the country, NASA, what now has been unveiled as the pivotal role she played? When did that significance become, when was your awareness of that? When did that happen?
Well, my youngest sister who lives in Greensboro loves to tell this story because, Mom worked and it was a secret environment, and all we knew was that she worked at NASA, she was working on a space program, and we were aware of whenever the shots would go up because, those early satellites, they were actually a piece of Reynolds wrap, kind of. They were very, very light, but if they traversed across the Earth, we could see them if we knew when they were going to come past and if we knew that they were doing it. So she shared that with us. But I got lost again.
Your sister.
So Kat is at school at Bennett in North Carolina, and she's in the library, And she looks, and here's this big picture of Mom. And back in the day, you wore a black outfit with a pearl necklace. We all wore those. That was almost like a uniform. And she said, "Oh, that's my mother." And big thing, it said NASA mathematician. And so she's looking, and so the library said, she said, "But that's my mother." So they read the article, and it goes down, and it says, and she has one daughter, Charlotte. Oops, Goebel. And so she said, "But it's not mother." So they put a retraction. So we started then, and then there was one of her professors was an under civilian assistant secretary of defense under somebody, Eisenhower back in there. Anyway, he called the college when I was at Hampton to have Mama a professional picture made of her. And we found out indirectly because they were going to put it in a government document of some sort. So we began to hear some things, but we didn't really hear a whole lot until many years later because, she didn't brag about it. Even now, it's still like pulling teeth. But when you realize in the scheme of things, there were, I think about NASA installations in the country back then, and each of them played a particular part in those space missions. So it took all of NASA to get the mission completed. And so she had her part, but then by the time public knew that there was a mission, all the work had been done for that one, and they were on to another one. So you just kind of, she didn't say...
She was doing her job.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the humility that you just referenced. Tell the story about when the building was named after her at NASA, and she was invited to the ceremony and asked what were her thoughts about the building being named after her. What did she think about all of the fuss being made?
Well, last year, 2016, NASA built a new computational research facility at Langley in Hampton. And so in February of last year, they dedicated it, named it after her, a 40,000 square foot building. So when they got ready to have the ribbon cutting with the governor and a few other dignitaries, including Senator Warner and the NASA head and several other dignitaries, they went to her home to tape it because we couldn't always count on her being in good spirits at an occasion, although I think she gets energized whenever she sees a lot of people just to talk to, not to talk about her. So they said, "Well, Miss Johnson, how does it feel having a building named after you?" She said, "I think it's stupid." They said, "What? Cut? Wait a minute. Let's do that again.
Second check.
Think of another word." She said, "I think it's crazy." And that's what they played, and all the people laughed about it. And then she told me later, she said, "I kind of wish they'd named it after the team." So she never took anything for granted or anything that she did as something she did, although I looked at those two missiles that the two boosters that came off at the shot about a couple weeks ago, and they were landing back on Earth to be used again. Some of you may have seen that. And I said, I bet your mom's basic information had to do with them bringing those back right on target.
Absolutely. All these years later, I'm sure they are still leveraging all of the great work. And again, the humility and her being a team player, saying, I wish they had named the building after the team. That speaks volumes. We're going to pivot a little bit because we're here talking a lot about your mom and her being an icon and her epic career and contributions to the space program in this country. But you have a pretty illustrious career yourself. So 30 years experience in the technology industry. So what cultivated that in you? Was her work was that a catalyst for you? Did she nurture that interest in you? How do you get to technology?
Well, I always wanted to major in math. I don't know what, excuse me, I don't know whether it was directly because of her, but I liked it. My son minored in it, and we have another nephew that's in the technical field. But I wanted to be a mathematician, and she wouldn't let me go on the boycotts when I was in college because she said, I don't want you to get arrested because then you won't be able to work at NASA.
Okay.
So I worked there for a year and a half in the reentry physics department, but I was in a little room with 5 other women. We were mathematicians with a supervisor, and the engineers would come in with the assignment and give it to the supervisor who would assign one of us. So it wasn't quite the same as mom's because they sent her to the engineers to work more directly with them and with their knowledge. And then after that, I had to move. I got married, and I had one child, and my husband went to the state employment agency for a job in accounting, and the state employment agency said, we don't have jobs for Negro accountants. So my husband had to come home to New York to look for a job, and that was a task, but that's how we got up here. Then when we got up here, there were no government installations where I could use my math skill. So my husband said, you need to be a programmer. So I balked at that, but then I had to. But then in order to get that first job, Urban League was printed up in the corner of my application, and that's really how I got the first job in programming. And I started with ITT and Paramus, and then I went to UNIVAC and ended up in Bell Labs and working on globalization. We were doing tracking for the missile defense against the Chinese and defending the country against that. So that was kind of what I worked on till I moved south again.
And I want it duly noted that you have some AT&T blue in your blood because you did a little tenure with AT&T through UNIVAC, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so I wanted to make sure we claim that. Everybody make note of that. Okay, that'll be in the next book, so watch out for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fact that your mom, there's so many women who have been the indirect benefactors of her success. Did you or did she realize the impact that she was having? When did it come to fruition that along the way she was paving the way for you and me, women in technology and other fields, not just the space program? Were those dots connected for her earlier on or not until the time of the movie and the book?
Well, I'll use myself as an example. When I was working at Lockheed, I started an NTA chapter, and that's the National Technical Association, which was started because blacks could not join IEEE. And so I had a chapter of about 30 of the young engineers, and I called them all my children because I was old enough to the mother of all of them. And one of them said, "You call her ma'am?" And I was like, "Yeah." It just, age never bothered me, like it never bothered Mom either. And so I've seen a few of them in the past few years, and they said, "You were the best mentor I ever saw." What? And so you really don't know. So you should be on your best behavior all the time, because you really don't know the impact that you may have, especially on a young person. There's some little something that you might say that might click with them. And since Mama tutored, she was always sharing these values of working hard. Because if you say you don't like math, she'll say, "Well, that was either your teacher's fault or you didn't want to work hard." So to that, you just put on your best face, because especially with the young people working with you, they bring something to the party, but you also have wisdom that you bring, and you should think that you don't become consumed by it, but you just don't realize what you might say that might be a positive influence on another person.
It's very powerful that you had not referred to yourself as a mentor to them, because you were doing something that was just organic and just natural to you. But they were certainly receiving it as such, and they referred to you as a mentor. So very, very powerful point about always being aware that someone is watching and looking to you for an example, whether that's positive or negative, they're watching.
And they might not even realize it in the beginning, because it's like 20 years have passed since we worked together, but then we see them again. But Mom says, always do your best and do it as if somebody else is watching. Don't just do it because the boss is sitting here, because you just don't know.
Right. Share a little bit about her love for young people and why it is that she, what's her quote about why she prefers to being around?
She said, because old people die. So she has, and I agree with her. I like young, my best girlfriend here.
Don't be jealous.
It doesn't.
Sorry.
It doesn't take but a minute. I met a lady on the Amtrak train going to Greensboro just a couple weeks ago, and I got a salad, and I said, "Oh, let me stay," because the Greensboro trip is about 9 hours. So I got my salad and I put it on the table. I said, "I'll eat here in the cafe car." And I looked at this lady, she uniformed, train conductor or ticket taker. So I said, "Watch my center, don't eat my salad." So she said, when I came back, she said, "You're firstborn, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I could tell because you told me don't eat that." So,
Bossy.
I said, "Didn't I say please?" She said, "No, you didn't." But it turns out we talked for 4 hours, and I talked to her and found out the real role of a conductor on the Amtrak train. And she had a degree. She was also an AKA teacher.
Wow.
And she had worked, but she had been a conductor for 16 years. And she said she has had a couple ladies come to her practically in tears, said, "I thought I'd never in my life see a black female conductor." So you just meet people and you share and
connections.
And have respect for people other than those in your profession, because a pro at anything is good, and they usually can do it better than you. And so now I know that the conductor is responsible for the whole train. And I thought it was the engineer. No, it's the conductor.
And you were open to learning that in that discussion and engaging her in conversation. And people relate to that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a little bit about our current STEM characteristics in the workforce. Technology has exponentially advanced and grown over the last 5 to 10 years. It seems like we go to sleep and wake up, and technology that we're using today is obsolete tomorrow. But in spite of that growth and in spite of that exponential growth, women of color make up less than 10% of the STEM workforce today. It's very much single digits. If you separate it, not one of the groups of the women of color